Welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein. Pleased to be joined by UConn head coach Dan Hurley. Dan, welcome. What was the best non-Jersey Shore vacation you've ever taken?
I would say back in the Rhode Island days when the sneaker companies did the coaching retreats. We were with Adidas back then. Went to Cabo. And that was great. That was great. The margaritas, the guac. Yeah.
Okay, so Cabo wins that title for Dan Hurley, and I'm sure this is the time of year where coaches obviously have to try and unwind and reflect a little bit. And I'm curious, as you reflect on the season that you just coach, how gratifying was it to go all the way to the national championship game with that specific group, even if you weren't the team that won its last game?
Maybe even Big Sky, Montana.
You're still on the first question.
Yeah, because now I'm like kind of relishing in, those nice moments, away from sport. So, Big Sky, that was pretty cool too, John. Like the hiking, the rafting, the horseback riding, going to Yellowstone, the food, elk steaks. I mean, that was like really. It wasn't as much fun as playing in the Final Four. The team. This year I would say, it's like. The two things being true, like you get so close to winning a third championship. You're a game away from putting on the table, here's our chips. We've won 3 out of 4 national championship games. I mean, you are 40-minute game away from having that chip as a program and as a staff and as an Alex Karaban as a player. Right. So gut punch that you didn't get it, but just the team getting us to that point, having overcome a couple of really gut-wrenching losses in the Big East in the regular season, losing at Marquette, losing the Big East championship game at the Garden in a no-show performance. And then, I think a lot of lesser players, lesser programs, lesser staffs, they go out in the round of 32, they go out in the Sweet 16, they go out in the Elite 8, and you call it a year. But, I'll always look back at that 26 team as one of my favorite teams. And not just the Duke moment, but just how hard that team fought to have a year where they got a real legacy that they left. The Tarris Reed, leaving as a legacy player, whereas if he loses in the round of 32 or in the Sweet 16, he's probably not a player that's remembered here for a long time as fondly as he is now.
What did you say to the team after the Michigan game in the locker room?
Didn't say much. It didn't say much, if anything, really. What we ended up doing was, we kind of suffered together, a lot of tears and a lot of emotion that way. We met briefly when we got back to the hotel, when we were able to pull ourselves together, just to schedule a meeting for the next morning. So we got up at 7 a.m. as a team and watched the edit of the game.
Wow.
I think we needed to do that. And we didn't do that with the championship teams.
Right.
We actually never got together again. We kind of left it as our last moment was cutting down the nets. But for us to kind of get past, why we didn't win our third championship in 4 years, felt like we needed to kind of watch it. Mm-hmm. And see why it happened and why Michigan was champions and we weren't, and be able to leave that there in Indianapolis, get on the plane, and move forward into the me season or the off season.
Well, Dan, obviously, I know it was really important for you to have a bounce back season in 25-26 after the disappointment that you went through in the year in between your Final Four appearances in 2025. But one of the big things I noticed, and it's not that you were stoic on the sideline, but you were much more reserved last season coaching and not talking at all really about legacy or things you had to accomplish. I'm curious for you internally, how much did you change and how much were you able to change your disposition from one season to the next?
Well, I think, John, I think the better your team is, the more composed that you're going to be, like on the sidelines, in press conferences, and media availabilities at game day shoot-arounds, walking in and out of the tunnel, whatever is going on. I think when when you have a belief in your team, and it's not that I'm always going to have moments, for me, because of my leadership style, because of the culture of our program, the enormous amount of energy and intensity and emotion that we play with and coach with, that we're always going to be a lively bunch when we show up to the arena. But we had an excellent team last year. We were, we had as good a non-conference performance as anyone in the country. Our only blemish being, the Arizona loss without two starters.
Yep.
To one of the best teams in the country, and and we had a pretty clean sheet in Big East play. Minus that Marquette road loss at the end of the year that cost us the regular season. Certainly losing to St. John's, and as good as they were in a Big East championship game at the Garden, was not exactly a loss that was that had no honor in it. So we had a great year, and we loved the team. And when you love your team and you believe in your team, I think you're not going to be as maniacal and as combustive as I was in the 25 season. When your team is not where you need them to be, it feels like every single call and every single possession are so life and death, because your team does not have much wiggle room or much of a safety net. So I think that probably contributed to that 25 year being so volatile, and the 26 year only having a couple moments of it.
Yeah.
but there were a couple.
18-2 in the last four NCAA tournaments, and the two losses were close defeats to the eventual national champions, Michigan this past year and Florida in 2025. But this run that your program has been on did not have a dramatic buzzer beater moment until Braylon Mullins' shot against Duke in the Elite Eight. What was it like for you to experience that?
I mean, you always look at other sports and you see, like, these dramatic sports moments. As a kid growing up, it was like Kirk Gibson, the home run.
Yep.
It was Duke, Christian Laettner shot. It's all these moments in sports, or these dramatic, buzzer beaters. And you always kind of say to yourself, I've never really been in a game like that, or I've never been on the winning side of that. And
right.
I don't, and I think the way that, obviously, the way that game played out, and a lot of the reaction, I would say too, like the pandemonium and then the sideline reaction, a lot of it had to do with how much of a struggle the game was.
Right.
Just to kind of fight and stay within striking distance and hope for an opportunity to put some game pressure on those guys. I would say a lot of the reaction too was, was kind of like the greatness of Duke and the how classy of a program they are, that I would imagine our sideline would have been electric no matter who we hit the shot against. But I think, when those moments happen against, the best of the best, I think, it probably accelerated the reaction even more because you're doing that against Duke. And, yeah.
Dan, I was rewatching the game here over the summer, and Silas Demery Jr. is at the line down 3 with about 10 seconds left, and he misses the first free throw. He hits the second, and then he causes the deflection that set up the game-winning 3. And I paused it for a second. I said, if he let the fact that he missed the first free throw get him down, he never would have been able to think about making the key deflection that set up the game-winning shot. Why did Silas Demery Jr. at UConn's most critical time never stop?
Looking for the book. Usually it's stationed somewhere, but
I know.
I guess Paul Wedderman, the great Paul Wedderman, finally missed. Well, with Silas, it's pedigree. You're getting a guy just from an awesome family, just an incredibly tight-knit group that, dad, big-time football player, just incredible mom and sisters. And just so he's got this character and he's got this pedigree that he brings to Connecticut, he brings to UConn. And then you combine that with, how the Huskies feel in March and April, and I think, the culture of our program, it's built on being relentless. It's built on competing like it's life or death, every bounce of every ball, of every possession of an entire game. And I think in those types of situations, we did the first thing right. We wanted to give ourselves a chance to get 2 traps or foul one of their 2 free throw shooters that were on the court that weren't very good free throw shooters. We expected the 2 traps to happen first pass, second pass. We didn't expect the second trap to happen at half court.
Right.
Where, and our only chance obviously was for, Silas, who's a ball hawk, to make a play on that ball. And, Silas made a play on that ball. If there's no play on that ball, there's no Braylon Mullins, the shot. So.
Yeah, and obviously Silas Demery Jr. is going to be a major factor for UConn next year as well. And as we look forward now to 26-27, what rendition of the Huskies can people expect here next season as you get ready to again be, in the mix for a 4th Final Four in 5 years?
Yeah, we got a formula, I think, for us that starts in the summer, where we get the team together and we put in just a really hard 8 weeks of really teaching these guys how we practice and how we want to play offense and, how we're going to defend and how hard we're going to play and, how we want to move the ball and how we want to go about the way that we play basketball at UConn. And, so we feel like we really know our team by the end of the summer so that when we get that little 10-day break before school starts, we can make the adjustments to the personnel based on how well we really know our team from, the amount of live reps that we put in during the summer. Like we feel like we've got a great grip on the strengths and weaknesses of our personnel, certain positions that are going to be the strength, and then what adjustments that we're going to need to make in our system on offense and defense, so that our players could be put in their best position to play well and for us to win games. But the things that we hang our hat on, how hard we play at both ends of the court, our preparation, how connected we're going to be just as a program, and how we show up from our identity and culture standpoint. It's just different faces, different types of talents, but the culture and identity are the exact same.
Players always make their biggest jump from their freshman to sophomore season, and the strength of your team is obviously on the perimeter. You're returning arguably, one of the top 2 or 3 backcourts in college basketball. Now that Braylon Mullins is on a team where he can be featured, and regularly be a focal point. What type of a jump do you think is within his reach in his second season of college hoops?
Yeah, I mean, a big jump for Braylon, and I think it's I think what makes Braylon unique too, as a guy who's an exciting, really one of the most exciting shooter scorers, offensive perimeter people in all of college next year. He's going to be one of the most fun players to watch. I think he's going to have some just explosive nights. But I think what makes him unique is the guy. He can pass, and he's a willing passer, and he's a two-way player. I mean, this guy guards. He gets on the backboard. So he does those winning things and tough guy things that a lot of kind of shooter scorers don't want to do. And, I think we've made some big strides in terms of, some strength and physicality, with a guy like Braylon. He's a bigger man, and I think that's I think that's going to bode well. But he's a two-way player, and a guy that a guy that plays winning basketball. He's not just this guy that's going to drop 30 a bunch of times next year.
Dan, Silas Demery's back. Braylon Mullins is back. A third piece on your perimeter is not currently available due to an injury, and that's Solo Ball. And you announced that Solo Ball planned to redshirt the upcoming year prior to the NCAA's age-based eligibility model going into play, where there are no red shirts. Is there a chance that if you think that Solo Ball is healthy enough to help UConn, that you could activate him at some point during the 26-27 season?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we haven't really even thought about, just, kind of based on the severity of what he dealt with, and what he soldiered through as a true UConn warrior, legacy player. I mean, we haven't even kind of gotten there from a timeline right now. He's still in a hard cast, and we're still so far away from even having a thought of that, just based on kind of the severity of what he dealt with and what he was able to play through. I just don't know that there's another player that would have done what he did in terms of just being there for his team and his program.
Well, toughness is a characteristic associated with your program. Alex Karaban exuded it for his entire career. He is no longer in Stores, and for the first time now in a half decade, UConn is going to soldier on without somebody who was one of the most decorated players in college basketball. What does life look like for UConn post Alex Karaban at power forward?
I mean, when these guys leave, John, you get worse right away.
Yeah,
you lose people like that. I mean, the day that his career, was completed, the program got worse, and now it's obviously you've got an incoming freshman class to try to, elevate the talent, the production, the maturity, the professionalism, the gamer, the winner, the warrior, the captain. I mean, those are attributes that not a lot of human beings are walking around with.
Right.
They need to be developed and coached and so through the portal, with the moves we've made with, bringing in I guess a veteran in in Nick or a Colbin Landrew or Jaden Ross is there. I mean, you're hoping to be able to, get the production and elements of what Alex brought through either, developmental people, homegrown talent like a Jaden Ross or a Colbin Landrew, or, going in the portal. For us, I'm not, we love the development part here at UConn. I think we're, if there's a veteran, a junior, senior, an older player like a Cam Spencer that we can, kind of plug and play into our organization, that just makes ultimately a lot of sense for our current roster, we'll go do it. But I think for the most part, we're going to do it with a younger team. We're going to try to play freshmen. We're going to play sophomores. I think a lot of our most critical players this year are going to be freshmen and sophomore players. Obviously, it's a benefit to have a Silas Demery, a Jaden Ross, seniors that are 4-year players that are real veterans. But I think if you look at our roster, we're banking on a lot of freshmen and a lot of sophomores.
Well, you mentioned Jaden Ross a couple of times. I thought in the Illinois game in the tournament, in the UCLA game in the tournament, he was a difference maker. And it feels like he has just gotten pieces of the pie here the last couple of years. Now that he is going to have a more expanded role, what type of a production level could he amplify his game to?
Yeah, I think he's got a chance to, to be a starter. I think he's got a chance to be a double-figure scorer, a starter, a guy that, I think, your prototypical 3-and-D guy that's got a chance to be an elite, perimeter defender, at 6'7". He's, again, I think it's like a common theme here. He's gotten stronger. He's gotten a lot bigger. He's put on like some great weight that was necessary for him to take the next step. You look at his 3-point shooting last year. He's going to obviously have a lot higher volume, but he shot the ball well. The guy's he's an above the rim finisher. I think that, he's a guy that, I've touted as a potential NBA draft pick, and I certainly see that for him at the end of this year, or certainly at the very worst, putting himself in a position where he's making a deadline decision. I think that he's had that great of a summer, that we're bullish on. You like, John, that you like that? We're bullish on him.
And who knows, maybe in November or December during a big non-conference game, we will see on social media, Jaden Ross, you should have bought stock a long time ago. And beyond that, if we look at other positions that have been obviously instrumental in this run, one of them has been the 5 spot. Tarris Reed played like an All-American last year. He was preceded by Samson Johnson and Donovan Clingan, who was preceded by Adama Sonongo. Is the 5 spot the X factor position for UConn in 26-27?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think you look at the backcourt and you feel like, you've got, one of the best point guards in college, if not the best, in Silas, and with Braylon, that combination, you feel like, again, if we don't have the best, it's one of the best backcourts, because they're both two-way players. So, they've got to take the, pressure off of, kind of our young center room, which is, it's 3 sophomores. And I think, 2 of those guys are players in the Jai Hines and in Big Oscar that, the analytics love them. The analytics love what they did as freshmen. The analytics love their profiles with what they're able to do, defensively on the backboard as efficient finishers at the rim. And we believe in both men's talent. I think with Najai Hines, you have a guy that's as talented as any center that we've had here, just from a talent standpoint as a basketball player. This guy, he develops new skills quickly. He understands the game and he understands sports because he's like a true athlete. It's just an ability to get him in great shape, getting him bought into, playing somewhere in the 260s is where we got to get him physically to have the impact. And then Oscar, as a guy from Stanford, he's a complementary center that isn't going to be that big physical low post, duck him in the way we use Tarris, the way we use Adama. We're going to use, Oscar more like we use the Samson Johnson, guy that's going to play, blitzing ball screens and roller and a runner and a rim runner and a guy that's getting off screens quick. So we've got 2 complementary guys. We understood that, that they were both good, young guys that were banking that we're going to develop them into the roles and production that we need from him. But yeah, I mean, it's the most unproven position, but the talent is there.
Dan, when you break out the fine-tooth comb for Najai Hines last season at Seton Hall, in games where he logged 20 minutes or more, he was a 10-8-3 guy. I don't want to make this comparison based on what we saw in the 2023 Final Four when he was the most outstanding player, but are there any elements with Najai Hines that resembles a young Adama Sonongo for when he arrived in Stores?
Yeah, I think, where he's at now, I think it's a definite comparison that both have this power game about them. And, and they're both, pretty nasty, like nasty in terms of just their physicality and the violence and the rage that they can play with. But I think the numbers, I think he's a guy that, again, we got to, he's done a great job working on his body this summer. We got a little bit more work to do. We got to kind of, get him into that 260 range, 265, 268. If he does that, he should be, 12 plus points a game, 8, 9, rebounds a game, 2.5 blocks a game. And you just look at what our centers do in our system. I think, the way that we're able to get the centers to play, the way that our guards are able to put them in great spots. They're highly efficient. And I think, he's a guy that there's potentially excellent ball screen defender, excellent rim protector, rebounds both backboards. He could score over either shoulder. We could throw it to him off the block. We could throw it to him on deep posts, and he's really good in the ball screen game. And I think he's got a feel for passing. So, the talent is there. We just got to help with the maturation process. And it helped that he played for a great coach, prior to getting here. He's able to play at a place, for a guy like Shaheen Holloway that really developed him already for a year in college.
And he'll be showcased during what is part of, again, another terrific non-conference schedule. Michigan in Boston, Ohio State at home, at Arizona, Duke in Vegas, Illinois in Chicago, Kansas in the state of Connecticut, and also Virginia at Madison Square Garden. That's 7 big-time games before the Big East. Why did you decide to go to another level this year and amplify it?
Well, I mean, we've been kind of trending, in this direction. I think the last couple of years, I think we've, whether it's a reaction to, what the league has looked like in terms of quad 1 and quad 2 opportunities, in terms of the number of teams that we projected to, potentially get, bids to the tournament, because the league, wasn't quite where it was when we came back into the conference.
Right.
The league had been on a little bit of a decline as of late in terms of the amount of teams getting into the March Madness. So it's been a reaction probably to that, which and then you don't get nicked for losing games to potential 1, 2, 3, or 4 seeds in the tournament. You get hurt when you schedule the bottom teams in power leagues and you end up losing non-conference games to those teams. Those end up costing you a seed line or 2 when it gets to tournament time. So we don't have to win all of those games. We just got to win our share of those games. And if we do that, we're going to put ourselves in a great position from a seeding standpoint. I do think the Big East is going to be a lot better this year. I think some of the new hires are going to pay dividends, whether they're first or second year coaches. And then we got a responsibility. We're one of the biggest brands in college basketball right now. I would say us and Duke right now have probably been able to separate ourselves. I know, certainly with what Florida and Michigan have been able to do, and Kansas and Kentucky and Carolina have got obviously great history, but we've got a responsibility to go play big games in the non-conference and play games that people want to watch.
Well, Dan, you've touched on a little bit with the struggles of the Big East. In a 76-team NCAA tournament, what is the number of bids that the Big East should aim to have?
The league is is not where we need to be as a conference, and I think we've got a lot of sports that compete in the Big East. And we got some great sports. At UConn, we've got a series of great sports beyond basketball on the men's and women's side at the basketball capital of the world. Obviously, our football program has been excellent. And now we've got Coach Candle over there. Our baseball team our soccer programs, track and field. I mean, we're excellent in championship level in so many different sports. But the Big East is known as a basketball. It's a basketball league. And if we're not a 6 or 7 bid league out of 11, then, we should be disappointed in ourselves as a conference. We shouldn't be patting ourselves on the back and kind of talking about, how well we're doing. A lot of it comes down to, you got to win big non-conference games.
Yep.
You really, how we could help each other be a 6 or 7 bid league is, we've got to play big games, and it really hurts the league when teams don't win big non-conference games.
Yeah. It'll be a major storyline to track, obviously, all season long leading up to Selection Sunday. And look, I know you're extremely proud of the team you just coached. I know that, again, you're on this incredible run, 18-2 in the last 4 NCAA tournaments. But you're somebody I know who always wants to take care of the neighborhood first. How personal have you taken it that a different program, St. John's, has won the last 2 Big East regular season titles and the last 2 Big East tournaments?
Yeah, I think anything that you didn't win that somebody else won, I think it was the first time I saw, now obviously Dusty moved on, but I think it was like the first time I saw Dusty since the national championship handshake line was like Memphis, EYBL, and it's like, boom, I saw the Michigan shirt or hat. I saw one of their coaches. I'm like, oh. I think that is your reaction anytime that you're, and it's nothing, personal about, any particular coach, or program, but we're all striving for things. I'm sure there's other programs that haven't been to a Final Four or played in an Elite 8 game or, like whose desire last year was to get to a Final Four and they didn't get there. And, they're probably tired of seeing us there. I think for us, I think you go into the year, saying to yourself, like, you want to win your regular season, you want to win your conference tournament, you want to get to a Final Four, win a national championship. I think the only programs that kind of walk away from the year, feeling like they had a successful year, like we didn't have the year we wanted, but we had a successful year.
Sure.
Because we were able to get to a Final Four. We were able to play for the national championship on the last bus on Monday. I think you could only walk away from a year if you win the regular season, you win you win the conference tournament. You're able to walk away from that year feeling like you accomplished some things. So I think there's very few teams in college that walked away from last year feeling like they had a successful year. I think we're one of several teams that felt like that way. So I'm sure St. John's felt that way as well.
Dan, how often do you think about winning a 3rd national championship?
Not as frequently as you think about having a championship recruiting cycle. Mm-hmm. I just got off the court for an hour and 20 minutes of intense 4-on-4-on-4, whether it was transition offense, cutthroat, score you keep it, and then 5-on-5 execution or a drop touch change. So I would say kind of like the relentless, obsessive life and death urgency of that practice being on par at a championship level of a 23 team, a 24 team, in terms of what it should look like, the quality of it, the production, the performance, the energy, the intensity, the attention to detail, to be able to sustain it from start to finish, like the day-to-day, like, and now whatever I'm going to walk into, staff meeting, whatever it is next, like that's got to be done at a championship level so that we have the habits, the routines, the mindsets, the behaviors that will put us in position to be in Detroit next year. We know where, where we want to be. We know that there's an opportunity, in the East region,
Yep.
To be in very comfortable places, prior to potentially being in Detroit. We got to earn the right to be there by having a better summer than any other program in college. That's what we are striving for.
How did you, in the last 2 years, change your thought process from being goal-driven to process-driven?
Well, I think that, it's, you've got the carrot that's always there. I think that there's a buy-in and a trust factor that our teams have when they get on campus that, when we're talking about our vision of paying the price and developing the types of habits and the practice style and the competitive nature of everything that we're going to do, that, the payout's going to be an opportunity for you to go to a Final Four, so like when we're preaching to our team, like this is what it's going to take, for us to have a chance to win a national championship. This new team that's here on campus since June, pretty isolated here in Storrs, Connecticut, is, it's a pretty Spartan existence. It's pretty lonely here in the summer, and we're just together, striving and pushing and paying the price that we know it's going to take, for us to get to a Final Four and to be on that last bus on Monday night. And it's a relentlessness by being in the gym. It's a relentlessness about how hard we're going to compete against each other to make each other better, and to take advantage of this time together so that we're getting ahead of our competition. That's all we're trying to do right now in terms of where we want to be as a team when we get through our summer, saying to ourselves that we have an advantage over other programs that didn't go as hard. That's got to be our mindset.
Well, let's wrap on this. You can't win another national championship without getting to the Final Four. So what are the biggest keys from your perspective for this specific team to take UConn to the Final Four for the fourth time in a 5-year span in 2027?
I mean, you're banking, like it's like any other year, like you're banking from 23 to 24. You're banking that Tristan Newton is going to take the junior to sophomore year, jump or bump that players in our program historically all make. They all make these big jumps from year to year. You look at the evidence, you look at the history of where, Donovan Clingan went as a backup freshman to sophomore starter. So it's a lot of those jumps that you're banking on, the Braylon freshman to sophomore bump, the Silas junior to senior bump, where those guys are like all-American level backcourt that are finalists and right there to win the Cousy or the Jerry West Award, right? That, that Jai Hines is going to be, one of the best centers in the country. Like that Nick Kamenia is going to fit, our system perfectly and be able to jump into that, connective piece that Karaban was, even though they're not the same type of player. That, Jaden Ross is going to be that senior, guy that it all comes together for, and that the junior counties and the Colvin Landrews are going to be able to, jump in and infuse us with the freshman talent. That, the big Oscar is going to give us that second look at center. That, that Niels is going to be that. The Joey Calcaterra, Cam Spencer-ish type of impact guard, that's going to give us versatility, shooting, veteran, so, we got a really good idea of who we are and who we need to be. And this is as talented a group as we've had in those other years.
Well, Dan, it's going to be a lot of fun to cover, as always, whether it's Big Sky, Cabo, or the Jersey Shore. Have a great rest of your summer. Appreciate a couple of minutes, know how busy you are. And as always, look forward to staying connected along the way.
What is it right now? This is only
August. This is only August. That's UConn head coach Dan Hurley. I'm Jon Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now.